Okay, guys. Happy Friday to you guys. Just want to mention that this focus question will definitely take you into Monday. So this is kind of a 2-day lesson. So Monday's double period, you'll be working on the second half of this lesson. It's a pretty long lesson because basically we got to look at 3 foreign policies from the 3 different presidents that we looked at during the Progressive Era. So if you remember, we looked at Teddy Roosevelt a little bit. We looked at William Taft and we looked at Woodrow Wilson. Now, we looked at them more from a progressive era industrialization perspective. Now we want to take a look at their imperialism or their foreign policy. All right. So, how does a nation's foreign policy build relationships with other countries? This is the time where the other eighth graders are introduced to them what foreign policy is. You should already know what foreign policy is, but if you don't, we could definitely write down the definition again. It can't hurt. So don't worry about the do now. That's not really for you guys. That's more for them. Just pause the video, write down the focus question. How does the nation's foreign policy build relationships with other countries? Now, if you are I'll be honest, if you're completely understanding of what a foreign policy is or what foreign policy is, you don't need to write the definition down. But if you can, please write down the definition of the word diplomacy, because I think everyone needs to get that down. If you're unsure what foreign policy is, then you could write that down as well. All right, so let's start from the beginning. We have known this word ever since George Washington's foreign policy of neutrality. So it should be basically this. Foreign policy is a government strategy in dealing with other nations or regions. And what you're going to notice is America continues to grow. All right, America is going to start to have a lot more foreign policies. We have now just won the Spanish-American War. We are a world power. Therefore, we have a lot more say of what's going on around the world. All right, so that means you need to make sure you have a good foreign policy. Now, prior to this, there was really only 2. You had, obviously, Washington's Proclamation of Neutrality, and you had the Monroe Doctrine. Besides that, there weren't too many foreign policies. That's going to change. Pretty much every president from Teddy Roosevelt on will have a foreign policy, a strategy in dealing with other nations or regions. That is a huge thing the executive branch leader, our president, does, is making sure they conduct good foreign policy and basically keep things peaceful, keep us out of war, and have good trade relationships. All right, so you're going to see 3 different types of examples over the next 2 lessons of different types of foreign policy. Donald Trump's foreign policy will be different from Joe Biden's and different from Barack Obama's, and Barack Obama's foreign policy would probably be different than George Bush. Every president kind of has their own spin on foreign policy, and it's really, centered around trying to keep America peaceful, but at the same time making sure we have a good foot in the world and making sure that other countries aren't misbehaving, so to speak. All right, and we'll see how we kind of go through this here. All right, so we should know that word already. So let's go to the word diplomacy, and then we'll just go over diplomat. You don't need to write diplomat down, but I think it's just a word that you'll come across, so it's good to know. So diplomacy is the art and science of conducting negotiations with other nations peacefully. So if you are trying to peacefully work out a situation around the world, if you are trying to be diplomatic, is the word sometimes, that means you're trying to basically solve a problem peacefully without the military being involved. Okay, now I don't want to say without the military being involved, but you definitely are trying to avoid war. All right, and the goal of many presidents is obviously to try and solve things peacefully. Now that doesn't always work out. All right, but the goal should always be for the presidents for at least to try and start diplomatically, to try and conduct foreign policy and negotiations with other nations peacefully. The way we do that is the presidents basically hire diplomats. Okay, now you guys know what representatives are. Representatives are people who represent us that go to government and vote on laws and bills and policies, okay, in our government. A diplomat kind of works the same way. It's a person we're going to send to represent the United States to another country. So we'll send diplomats all around the world, and then other countries will send diplomats here. Okay, if you've ever been in New York City, or if you've ever just been walking outside and you see a car with flags on the front hood, that is because that is a diplomat. That person's actually from a different country, and they are there representing that country. All right, diplomats have a lot of freedom when they go to countries because they're actually under the other government's rules. So, like, if a diplomat comes here from China, they can't get in trouble in the United States. If they do something wrong, they have to be sent back to their country, and then they could get in trouble there. But that usually doesn't happen. A diplomat's an official who represents a country abroad, and this is very similar to a representative. This is just someone who's going to another country to basically try and push our foreign policy or trying to work things out diplomatically. All right. So with that being said, we need to just go over a couple things before we get into the first major foreign policy under Teddy Roosevelt. Really, there's two that we need to know. Okay, so we're going to have to know both of them, but ultimately, we need to start with this. So we know this already. Don't write this down. We know from the last lesson he was responsible for the Spanish-American War, leading the group called the Rough Riders that helped win the Spanish-American War. We know his work with the Progressive Era, being a trust buster and being a conservationist, the first conservationist president. All right, and he's responsible for helping to create the Panama Canal, and that's really what we're going to look at him for the next 2 days. Okay, now this is something that many students do end up getting. It's something that you probably already know, but you're not 100% sure. Well, so we have here in the Western Hemisphere, we have two continents geographically. We have North America and South America. Now, the countries in South America and the countries in Central America are kind of similar. All right, so when we break it down, we have North America, and within North America, you have an area called Central America. Okay, and that sometimes is connected to South America, but please keep in mind, Central America and South America are two separate countries. So what is two separate continents? Excuse me. So what is this area in green called? What is the combination of Central America and South America? What is that combination called? Well, we call that Latin America. So Latin America is the combination of Central America and South America. So why do we need to know this? Well, these areas here in Central America and South America, aka Latin America, are very close to the United States. I'm not sure if you can see my mouse. I'm sorry if you can't. And since they're very close to the United States, we want to have a good relationship and a good foreign policy with them. Now, we already saw what happened when we got into a conflict with Cuba and Spain and how that led to the Spanish-American War. And we want to make sure we're trying to avoid things like that in the future and making sure our relationship is good in these areas. Now, we already have the Monroe Doctrine, but we need to take the Monroe Doctrine a step further, because ultimately the language of the Monroe Doctrine said that they wouldn't allow any new colonies to go into this area of Latin America and into the Western Hemisphere. The problem is the Spanish-American War. Spain had already been there for over 100 years, so they were like exempt from the Monroe Doctrine. They weren't a new colony. And we still got into a war with them. So we need to fix the language out a little bit. So let's take a look at this. Roosevelt query to the Monroe Doctrine. You can pause the video if you need, but basically Teddy Roosevelt, in his first act, one of his first acts as president, and one of his first acts in American foreign policy, is he wants to add what's known as the Roosevelt Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. Okay, so let's break down kind of what that means. Now, a corollary is a proposition or a statement that follows an already approved document. Right, so when you add a corollary, it's like adding an amendment. Though it's not necessarily a change, it's just an addition. So a corollary is sometimes used when you have certain foreign policies, and this is one of those opportunities. All right, so it's very similar to the Monroe Doctrine because it's written as like it's attached to the back of it. But basically, it stated that America will protect all Latin American countries from any European/Asian conflict. So when we got to the Spanish-American War, remember at the beginning, at first we decided to be neutral. America is basically saying that won't happen again. If there is a war that breaks out in Latin America between Europe, let's say a European colony or an Asian colony comes over to Latin America and they get into a war, we're going to defend the Latin American country. We're not going to stand for a country from Europe or Asia getting into war with one of these Latin American countries. And this is meant, one, to protect the United States, because we saw what happened with the Spanish-American War. We didn't get involved, and then we got involved. Right? This is kind of to prevent that. And also to kind of build up some better relationships with Latin America, so we're more friendly with them. And what is kind of come from this is it has made the United States the police of the Western Hemisphere. Okay, it's made the United States the police of the Western Hemisphere. I'm not sure. I got to recheck it. I think you will do some political cartoon practice well, you see a rather famous political cartoon of Teddy Roosevelt in a sheriff's uniform, basically working through this. All right, but this made the United States the police of the Western Hemisphere. They're kind of around, making sure that Latin America is kind of being protected. Okay, especially from Europe and Asia. All right, and there's a little cartoon here on the right, not the same one I'm talking about. It said, obviously, this is here Uncle Sam. Okay, that's a representation of the United States, and it says, "I will interfere in Latin America so that you Europeans can't." You got a problem with that? Okay, basically showing off our muscles that we're going to take control of Latin America, not take over any of the colonies necessarily, but be more of a protection. So you see how imperialism has many different avenues of being understood. Imperialism can mean that we fully take over a country. It also can kind of mean that we have good trade relationships. We open up trading relationships like China and Japan, or it sometimes means we're more protective of other countries like Latin America. So it's basically just being more involved on the world scale. All right. So with that being said, okay, let's go through this Regents question. President Theodore Roosevelt's corollary to the Monroe Doctrine primarily affected Latin America by what? Pause the video if you need. Otherwise, if you know it, the correct answer is going to be 4, increasing U.S. intervention in the region. We're going to make sure that area of Latin America is going to be a major focus for us to basically intervene and protect. All right. Now, I'm going to remind you of this on Monday, but every single foreign policy that we have for the 3 presidents is, how do I put it, is going to be centered around Latin America. So all of the foreign policies are going to be related to this area of the world. Now, different countries can have different foreign policies. So a great example is we're not so friendly with North Korea. So our foreign policy towards them in 2021 will be a lot stronger and a lot less nice than, let's say, our foreign policy to Mexico, let's say, okay, one of our allied countries. All right, if we're more allied with the countries, the nicer our foreign policy. But for all these foreign policies, we're going to look to this area of the world, Latin America. Now, the Roosevelt corollary to the Monroe Doctrine is just part of Teddy Roosevelt's foreign policy. What he really gets known for is what's known as his big stick foreign policy. And it's really centered around this quote, speak softly and carry a big stick, you will go far. That is the quote Teddy Roosevelt would use, and this is kind of the basis of his foreign policy. Okay, so pause the video if you need. Take a second, think about what you think that means, and then we will go over it. Now, one of my favorite lessons that I teach in person happens to be this lesson, because in years past, what I pretty much always do is I take one of the students before class, maybe one of the students that's maybe a little more rambunctious or maybe caused some problems. Maybe we'll talk back to teachers, and I'll take them aside or her, and I'll say, look, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a little skit. None of the other kids are going to know about it, but I'm going to ask you a question to move your seat. Please move your seat. Tell me no. Okay, I'll ask you again nicely. Tell me no again. And I say, I'm going to go get a bat. I'm going to take out the bat, and I'm going to ask you the same question again, and then you're going to get up and move. And this is kind of my way of teaching Teddy Roosevelt's foreign policy, his big stick foreign policy. Because if you look at the quote, and I can't do this here because we are doing this remotely, and the kids usually get freaked out because they think I snap, they think I take out a bat, and I'm about to hit the kid, but that's not what I'm doing. Okay, I'm trying to explain how the big stick foreign policy works. Okay, so basically, his foreign policy in Latin America is centered around this. At first, be respectful. You should definitely write this down. Be nice to other countries. Okay, ask them nicely. There's no reason to kind of walk around and just demand everything from countries, especially smaller countries. You don't have to go taking these countries over. And at first, be nice and respectful to other countries and ask them nicely. But if they say no, show that you have military force, show that you have military dominance over the country to get what you want. So basically, the way I kind of think of it is like, picture someone who's walking around with like a weapon or a bat, okay? And this is where the term big stick foreign policy comes around, is that, picture Teddy Roosevelt's walking around with a bat, or someone's walking around with a bat, and kind of asking you like nicely. So if I walked around with a bat and that I'm not afraid to use it and hit you with it, I'd be like, hey, do you mind moving your seat? You might be more willing to do it if you're more threatened about getting hurt. Okay. So it's a metaphor. So he's not literally walking around with a baseball bat. He's trying to show and explain that he wants to treat like his country is shouldn't be messed with, but it's not one that has to be aggressive or yelling or loud. There's an old saying: the loudest person in the room is probably the person you shouldn't be most afraid of. All right, the person who's screaming, yelling, if a fight's about to break out, if someone's screaming and yelling and talking all this trash, that's probably not the person to be most worried about. You should be most worried about the person that's not talking and doesn't seem too concerned, right? Because they're very calm and they're very confident probably what they can do. So Teddy Roosevelt here basically is saying America has a very strong military. We're a very strong country. We're world power. We're going to try and treat other countries nicely and work with them peacefully and, is my word, diplomatically. But if they don't go along with what we want, we're going to use the military force to get what we want. All right. So his quote, "Speak softly and carry a big stick, you will go far," basically says, be nice and respectful. If countries don't go along with us, we're going to show them the big stick, okay, our military, and we'll go far with it. So the best example that he does this is just going to be the last part of the lesson. And then you're going to get into the assignment. Okay. And this is going to continue into Monday. So you're not going to be done, but I at least want to get you set up on how Teddy Roosevelt uses the big stick foreign policy to get the Panama Canal, which is a huge thing for America and a huge thing for the world. And I'll explain how. So let's take a look at this. This is a map of the world. I don't know if you can see my mouse. It doesn't look like you can, so you need to use my words to kind of help you out. But basically, if we were in school, I'd have a kid come to the board and say, okay, only using the blue, only using the oceans, how do you get from New York, the east coast of the United States, to California without cutting through any of the countries? So if you follow my mouse, I'm not sure if you can, you would take the Atlantic Ocean, okay? You go down south towards South America. You go under South America, under Argentina, and come all the way back up the Pacific Ocean here and end up in California. That is the quickest way to get to New York to California via boat. And this is costing the United States way too much time and way too much money. Here's a better visual here. Okay, so the option in red is what the people of the United States had to do if you were shipping, come all the way down, come all the way around, and this would be 21,000 kilometers. Teddy Roosevelt in America says, wouldn't it be kind of nice if we can maybe cut a shortcut through, this area of Central America, this area of Latin America? It's such a small little area here. Maybe we could just kind of cut through and save us, 2/3 of the amount of time. Okay, save us 13,000 kilometers, save us, weeks of shipping. Okay, the longer it takes to ship something, the more money it costs, as you can imagine. So it's not only going to save them time, it's also going to save them money. So basically, long story short is America has this idea that, what? We can maybe build a canal. Now, if you remember back in American history, we built the Erie Canal in New York. Now, that was simple because New York was owned by the United States. The United States government and the New York government had the power and authority to do that. They just had to come up with a way to fund the money, and they just had to come up with a way to build it. Now, we want to do the same thing. The only problem is we don't own these countries. We don't own Colombia. We don't own Costa Rica. We don't own Panama. So how in the world can we build a canal there? Well, you know what? How do we build a canal there? We go and ask them. Now, just not to go too far ahead because this is going to go into tomorrow, Colombia actually owns the country of Panama. Okay? Colombia owns the country of Panama at this point. So we have to go and ask Colombia if they will allow us to build a canal there. We'll give them some money. This will not only help out the United States, but this will help out the rest of the world because people could pass through there. And then, you could pay a toll through Colombia and Panama and make them money. Long story short, Colombia says no. All right. And now that's where I'm going to end today's lesson because I want us to get to the assignment. But I also will say that we are going to go into a little bit more why Colombia and Panama kind of say no and how this leads to a huge issue and how the big stick foreign policy will be used. Okay? So we're going to end today's lesson there. Okay. I want to say a couple of things before we get started with the assignment. Okay. So first and foremost, if you haven't noticed, you have your Unit 4 test on Wednesday. I'm thinking by the end of the double period on Monday, you will be done with all of the assignments from Unit 4. Therefore, we'll give you a study day on Tuesday. But if you want to get a head start on studying, you can go to the quiz or test prep review, work on that, and you guys should be fine. Right now, you have a very basic reading on the Panama Canal. Okay, right here are all right here's the reading, 1 page long. We'll kind of get a better sense of how it kind of got built. Now, Teddy Roosevelt uses the big stick foreign policy. We are not done with it, though. You will see how it's done, and we'll have some videos. And then you're going to answer the questions on the answer key here. You will notice there are 6 short answer questions and then 4 multiple choice questions. Just write the answers down in the correct spots. All right. So that is it for today. I hope you guys have a great weekend. We will have double period Monday. We will wrap up. We will wrap up the rest of this assignment and the rest of this unit. And yeah, we'll have our test on Wednesday. So we're getting there. All right. And I will speak to you all on Monday. Have a good weekend.